A shrill, slicing hiss tore through the luxurious air like a blade slashing across glass. "Filthy! Who allowed you to step into our world?" The entire ballroom of the Aurora Grand Hotel froze. The crystal glasses glittering beneath the chandeliers seemed suspended in mid-air. And at the eye of the storm, Miranda Kingsley, a woman accustomed to living at the very top of Chicago's social pyramid, charged straight toward a man standing absolutely still, Daniel Carter. For a moment, no one breathed. Hundreds of necks strained forward. Phones came out in unison. What was about to happen would be replayed hundreds of millions of times within hours. Daniel stood beside the auction display, the spotlight casting a quiet sheen across his simple black tuxedo. His expression was calm, his eyes still and wintry, showing no reaction to Miranda's furious strides. But inside, his heart sank with the heavy certainty of watching a door slam shut at a speed the person in front of him could not yet comprehend. Miranda stopped inches from him, her breath thick with wine and arrogance, brushing across his cheek. "Who do you think you are? Who invited you here? People like you." She left the sentence hanging, but her face finished it for her. Guests nearby tilted their heads, eyes narrowing, waiting for the next blow. The air thick with roses and expensive perfume now carried the cold metallic scent of prejudice. Daniel glanced down at his hands, clasped lightly behind his back, to keep them from trembling with emotions he couldn't name. Silence. Patience. It was how he had been taught to survive. But tonight, patience did not mean weakness. It felt like the still surface of a lake, moments before a storm breaks. "Answer me!" Miranda shouted, her voice cracking through the ballroom like splitting glass. She snatched her Bordeaux glass, the dark red wine, swirling like fresh blood under the lights. One look at her eyes told Daniel exactly what was coming, and he also knew the truth, that splash wouldn't just stain his suit, it would burn an entire dynasty to the ground. Miranda hurled the full glass of wine into Daniel's face. The freezing liquid hit his skin and exploded into 1,000 dark crimson drops. The stain spread across his white shirt like a massive wound, opening for everyone to see. A few guests gasped behind their hands. Someone let out a strangled scream. Daniel did not blink, did not flinch, did not move. He remained perfectly upright, shoulders still, as wine dripped down his sleeve. Then he smiled. A small smile, clear, strange. A smile that sent chills across the room. Because it wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It wasn't the smile of someone powerless. It was the smile of a man watching an opponent climb willingly onto a guillotine. Miranda stepped back half a pace, her face flickering between confusion and triumph. "You see," she cried to the crowd. "This is exactly why they don't belong in places like this." Her heels struck the marble floor in frantic, triumphant beats. She turned to the audience, arms spread wide, soaking up attention like an actress basking in her spotlight. What was he thinking? That a cheap tuxedo would help him blend into our society. People like him only know how to take advantage, climb over others, flatter the right person, squeeze whatever they can. Her words crashed across the ballroom like heavy stones hitting a still lake. Daniel drew in a slow breath. The mix of Bordeaux and roses burned faintly in his nose. The whispering of guests blurred at the edges of his hearing. His mind drifted into a slow, glass-like clarity. He saw the frightened look of a young server standing a few steps away, saw the trembling hands of an older man recording video, saw the discomfort, even fear in the eyes of several elegantly dressed women. And above all, he saw Miranda's burning, satisfied gaze the gaze of someone who had never understood that real power did not live in shouting, but in truth. A truth she had no idea was standing right in front of her. "Nothing to say," Miranda scoffed, lifting her chin. "Not going to defend yourself?" "Of course. Because you know you don't belong here." The moment she finished, an invisible crack split the room. No one heard it, but everyone felt it. A point of no return shattered. Daniel slowly lifted his eyes, locking onto Miranda's. The chandeliers reflected in his gaze, not with anger, not with hatred, but with the cold clarity of a man watching the future collapse around the woman before him like a tower of cards. His voice came low, smooth, deep as a well. "Mrs. Kingsley," he said, the sound carrying effortlessly to the back rows. "I believe you have just made the greatest mistake of your life." The ballroom fell into absolute silence. No laughter, no whispers, only the sound of wine dripping from Daniel's shirt onto the marble floor, each drop echoing like a countdown. Miranda frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He reached calmly into his pocket and pulled out a spotless white handkerchief, the gentle movement stark against the chaos she had unleashed. He dabbed the wine from his chin, never breaking eye contact. That smile returned. Deeper, steadier, far more terrifying, because it was the smile of a man who knew without doubt that the future would belong to him. "I'm afraid," Daniel murmured, "you're about to learn who truly doesn't belong in this world." In the corner, a young woman's hands shook so violently she dropped her champagne flute. A man stepped back without realizing it. Several faces shifted, as if sensing something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. Something bigger, heavier, already slithering toward them. And then slowly, clearly, Daniel lifted his gaze to the entire room. He knew. 400 people knew. Miranda did not. But in just a few minutes, the world as she knew it would crumble into dust. That morning, Chicago woke beneath a cold light cutting through grey clouds, as if the city itself were trying to warn everyone about a coming storm whose eye no one could yet locate. Sunlight streamed through the glass facade of the 58th floor of the Carter Impact Group building, stretching long golden bands across the walnut floor and draping the wall of urban planning maps like a thin ribbon. Inside the vast office, Daniel Carter signed the most important contract of his career, a document that would eventually become a death sentence for a powerful family he did not yet know he was about to confront. 9:47 in the morning. A simple number, but one that would soon appear in countless articles, news reports, and financial market analyses. His Montblanc pen glided across the final line. Daniel's sharp signature cut a boundary between two worlds, the world he had spent years building through foresight and purpose, and the world rotting quietly beneath the surface, a world he would see more clearly than ever by nightfall. "Daniel, you just saved my family." The trembling voice came from across the desk. Edward Kingsley, 55 years old, still carried a trace of the old-school businessman's posture. Charcoal suit, wine-colored tie hands that never stopped shaking from pressure. Sweat beaded on his forehead, even though the air conditioning was running full blast. "You saved the company. You saved everything." Daniel stood and shook his hand. "This project matters. Not just to you, but to the entire city." He said nothing about the enormous profit or the long-term strategy. He knew Edward had no room left in his mind for such things. The man was suspended between fragile hope and exhaustion that had lasted through 3 brutal quarters. Kingsley urban development was collapsing stalled construction, mounting bank debt investors fleeing. Daniel understood. He had read every report, studied every number. But what he needed to understand most was not on paper. It was in people. That was why he went to social events, quietly, never flaunting his identity, never announcing his presence, just watching and remembering. "You'll be at the gala tonight, right?" Edward asked, forcing a smile. "Miranda has been planning this event for months. She'll be happy to see you." Daniel nodded, though a faint unease flickered through him. He had met many types among the elite, most pretending to be gracious, the rest not bothering to hide their contempt, and Edward had never spoken much about his wife. Not a good sign. A few minutes later, after Edward left the room, with the light, shaky steps of a man briefly relieved, Daniel remained alone in complete silence. The sunlight reflected off a photo of him, standing with residents of a rebuilt neighborhood, faces lit with genuine smiles he always considered the real value report. That was why he existed in this industry, not for power, but for the chance to touch places that were falling apart and rebuild them into hope. And tonight, he needed to know whether the Kingsleys deserved the capital they were asking for. Early in the afternoon, Daniel drove his old SUV to the west side, a place most gala attendees had never stepped foot in. There were no Bentleys or Mercedes here. Only aging corner stores, rattling buses, and the small barbershop of Mr. Harris, the man who had watched Daniel grow from a barefoot kid into the person who came here whenever he needed to look presentable. "Well, look who's here," Mr. Harris laughed, brushing dust off the cracked leather chair. "You make me remember the days you kids sat out front, talking about big things nobody else understood." "I still talk about big things," Daniel said, settling into the seat. Sure, the old man snorted, beginning to cut. Strands of hair fell rhythmically, like the ticking of a clock. This neighborhood's changing too fast. Housing prices up, rent up, kids moving away. Families who lived here 50 years are being pushed out. Daniel listened the way he always did. He didn't say he was the one who had signed a contract to fix these very problems. He didn't mention that in a few hours he would stand in a ballroom full of wealthy people to see how they treated the very people they claimed to want to help. "Gala tonight, huh?" Mr. Harris asked. "Wear something sharp. Don't let them talk down to you." Daniel laughed. "I'll wear something simple. Polite enough." "You know me." The barber raised an eyebrow. "You always do that. Blend in so you can see who people really are." Yes, that was Daniel. And tonight he knew he would need sharper eyes than ever. At 6 p.m, the city lights flickered to life under a navy sky. Daniel stood before the mirror, straightening his black bow tie. His tuxedo wasn't a bespoke piece, made just for him, only a clean, well-cut, high-quality suit. No Rolex. No diamond cufflinks. Nothing that told others he could buy the entire room. Because he didn't want to buy the room. He wanted to see its heart. In his suitcase lay the contract he had signed that morning, tucked inside a black leather folder. A document worth $1.5 billion. A key to the future of tens of thousands of people. Daniel rested his hand on it, lightly, just enough to remind himself, if tonight he saw the shadows of cruelty, of hatred, of values he could not allow into his world, he would close that suitcase and walk away. Even if it meant shattering a 3-generation empire. He inhaled, exhaled, chose his jacket. Tonight was not a celebration. It was an examination, for the Kingsleys, for the city, for himself. And he had no idea that the evening ahead would unfold far beyond anything he had anticipated. It would not be him searching for answers. The answers would come to him first in the form of a glass of red wine and a scream that would be recorded forever. Light from hundreds of chandelier bulbs poured over the grand hall of the Aurora Grand Hotel like cascades of liquid gold. Each ribbon of brightness slid across hand-woven gowns, glinted off crystal glasses, and wrapped the entire ballroom in a halo that made everything feel like a stage crafted for the illusion of wealth. The orchestral music drifted through the air as softly as breath, and among the sea of guests no one knew a quake was building beneath their feet. At 7:45 in the evening, Daniel stepped into the gala. He melted into the flow of guests like a quiet shadow, leaving nothing in his appearance to reveal who he truly was. A clean, well-fitted black tuxedo, no loud designer labels, no watch worth hundreds of thousands. He walked like a man invisible, and that was exactly how he wanted it. To stay hidden, to observe, to see truth in people when they believed no one was looking. The ballroom operated like a perfectly tuned social machine, handshakes exchanged like stock trades, praises and flattery fluttering around like butterflies, and stories about charity delivered with a strange, self-satisfied pride, spoken as if compassion were an accessory worn for the night and put away as soon as the gala ended. Daniel moved quietly through the crowd, his eyes catching every detail. He heard the casual talk about real estate prices, the sharp laughter of shareholders, and the murmured complaints that the poor need to know their place. Every word, every glance, every gesture was a piece of a portrait he was assembling in his mind. And then he saw Miranda Kingsley. She stood in the center of the ballroom, like the spotlight itself existed solely to illuminate her. Platinum blonde hair pinned high with diamond clips worth the price of a luxury car. A bright Cartier necklace at her throat. White satin gloves lifting a glass of champagne as if she were raising a symbol of authority. Miranda wasn't conversing. She was performing. Every movement of her hand, every tilt of her head was intentional. Around her gathered the most influential women of Chicago's elite people, capable of making companies rise or collapse with 3 phone calls. "We are here to help the less fortunate," Miranda said, loudly enough for those nearby to hear. Although not everyone can truly be helped. Her smile curved upward, cold and sharp. Some cultures do not value education, do not value discipline. It is tragic, really. The circle around her nodded and raised their glasses without hesitation, as if they had not just heard an unmistakably racist insinuation. Daniel's heart sank like a stone falling into deep water. Not because he was surprised. He had heard such words many times. But Miranda's tone carried something thicker than arrogance. It carried the certainty of someone who had lived her entire life at the top and believed nothing could ever make her fall. He walked toward the art auction area where paintings by inner-city students were displayed. Bold strokes, colors clashing and blazing like bursts of hope, trapped in forgotten neighborhoods. Daniel read each description, absorbing the stories behind every canvas. He stopped at one piece, dominated by a fierce blend of orange and blue, where light and darkness seemed to collide. "Impressive, isn't it?" an elderly woman's voice said beside him. She wore a fur coat and held a magnifying glass. "This child has been through so much." I read the file. "Lost both parents young. Lives with an aunt. Paints to escape reality." Daniel nodded gently. "I can see the struggle in the colors, but I can also see hope." The old woman smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Not many people in this room can see that." Daniel opened his mouth to reply, but a sharp, metallic gaze sliced across the space and struck him. Miranda Kingsley was staring straight at him. Not with curiosity, with irritation, with offense, as if his very existence beside inner-city artwork was a personal insult. She began walking toward him. Each step landed like the pound of a metal hammer. Her heels clicked harshly on the marble floor, making people instinctively part ways for her, creating a path she didn't need to ask for. The chandelier light caught the diamond pinned in her hair, making her look like a character stepped out of a Victorian power portrait, and her personality certainly matched the worst kind of aristocratic cruelty. Daniel straightened as Miranda stopped in front of him. Her perfume thickened the air like a stifling fog. "Who are you?" she asked, voice low but sharp as a blade. "I don't recognize you, and I always recognize the people meant to be here." Daniel replied politely, "Steady, I received an invitation. I'm here to support the education fund." Miranda's lips curled. An invitation from whom she narrowed her eyes. "I approved the entire guest list. I would not forget someone like you." Those words, "someone like you," fell like a weighted stone. Nearby conversations stilled. Breaths caught mid-air. Phones were lifted almost in unison, as if everyone shared the instinct that something bigger was about to unfold. Daniel held her gaze without flinching. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Miranda laughed, a sharp, cutting laugh that made her necklace tremble. A misunderstanding? No. The only misunderstanding is that you thought you belonged here. A young black server approached with a tray of champagne. Miranda snapped her fingers. Do you know him? What department does he work in?" "Kitchen logistics." The girl startled. I don't know him." Miranda turned back, eyes glowing with triumph. "See, I knew it. He doesn't belong in this room, doesn't belong in this circle, doesn't belong anywhere here." Whispers spread outward like fire racing across dry grass, and Daniel understood. This was the moment he had come to witness, a moment that could not be hidden, repaired, or denied. In that instant, he didn't know that only minutes later, she herself would destroy her own future with the same arrogance and venom she believed would always go unpunished. But Daniel knew something deeper. This ballroom was not just a gala. It was a mirror held up to the soul of an entire empire, and the mirror had begun to crack. The air inside the Aurora Grand Ballroom felt as if an invisible hand had wrapped around it and squeezed. The orchestra fell silent. Conversations collapsed into sharp breaths and the rustle of fabric. Everyone sensed something was coming, something unstoppable like a train loaded with explosives, hurtling downhill with no brakes. Miranda Kingsley stood facing Daniel Carter, her eyes burning with something no one ever wants to see, in a room meant for elegance, raw, undisguised hatred. She made no attempt to hide it. No attempt to restrain herself, no attempt to maintain decorum. The frightening part wasn't that she was losing control, it was that she truly believed she had the right to say what she was saying. "Who do you think you are?" Miranda's voice sliced through the room like shattering glass. "I know every person in this room, every face, every family, every generation, and I have never seen you." Daniel released a slow breath. "I'm here for the charity cause." Miranda laughed high and sharp, hollow and dripping with malice. It scraped the air like metal dragged across tile. "Charity, oh, I see. You must have heard this is where rich people loosen their wallets, right? You came to see what you could squeeze out of someone." Nearby, a man set down his glass, trying to intervene. "Miranda, I think—" "Be quiet," she snapped, never breaking eye contact with Daniel. "He's not a guest. He's an opportunist." She flicked her hand. 2 security guards stepped forward, immediately, their faces tight with unease. as if they sensed something was wrong but were too afraid to contradict the most powerful woman in the room. "Mrs. Kingsley Daniel," said voice low and steady. "I believe you're misunderstanding. She tilted her head, her smile twisting into something vicious. "You expect me to believe that you, in that rented tuxedo speaking like someone trying hard to sound polished, are an honored guest at a billionaire gala?" Daniel held her gaze, unwavering, unmoving. Only the faint pulse at his neck betrayed the effort it took to keep his emotions contained. Miranda noticed, and she pressed harder. "People like you," she said, punching each word as if it were a nail, "only show up at events like this to collect handouts, to beg, to pretend you belong. But the truth," her voice rose, "you do not belong here. Phones lit up around them like a swarm of fireflies. People raised them, filming, recording. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others stared, hungry for spectacle." Miranda glanced at the young black server who had passed earlier. "Hey, girl. He works at the hotel, right? Skipping a shift." The server shook her head so quickly her tray nearly fell. "No, ma'am. I've never seen him." Miranda turned back, triumph blazing across her face. "See, I knew it." Daniel tightened his hand behind his back, but his expression remained calm, so calm that a few guests exchanged looks, whispering, "Who is he? Why isn't he reacting? Why is he so steady?" "Perhaps you should calm," Daniel began. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," Miranda shouted, startling the people behind her. "You think you can walk in here as an equal? Let me make it clear for you. Nobody here wants you. Nobody wants your kind." A ripple of discomfort swept through the room. Some covered their mouths, some shook their heads. But none spoke up, because Miranda Kingsley was not someone anyone wanted as an enemy. Miranda snatched a glass of red wine from another server's tray. The wine sloshed violently, catching the light like congealed blood, and in that moment, the entire ballroom held its breath, because everyone knew exactly what she was about to do. "Let me teach you your place." She threw it. The red wine arced through the air in a perfect curve, hitting Daniel's face with an icy slap. It streamed down his chin, soaked into his white shirt, blooming across it like fresh wounds. Guests screamed. Champagne glasses crashed to the floor. But Daniel again didn't move. He didn't wipe his face. He didn't step back. He didn't change expression. And in that instant, everyone understood this man wasn't who Miranda believed he was. Any ordinary person would have shouted, fought back, stormed out. But Daniel didn't. He stood there as if calculating something far beyond this moment, as if he had already expected something like this, as if he knew this was only the first spark in a much larger fire. Miranda stepped back, chest-heaving face, flushed with a twisted thrill. She lifted the empty glass like a trophy from a battle only she believed she had won. "Better now," she said, triumphant. "Now you understand. This isn't your world. You don't belong here." "You're nothing but..." Daniel lifted his head, and then came his smile, soft as a passing breeze, yet powerful enough to wipe the grin from Miranda's face. It was not a smile of submission, not a smile of weakness. It was a smile that made the people nearest to him shiver, a smile that said, "Thank you. You just buried yourself." Guests stepped back on instinct, sensing a shift, a quiet, seismic rearrangement of power that Miranda, drunk on her own superiority, was too blind to notice. Mrs. Kingsley Daniel said, his voice calm to the point of being terrifying, echoing through the thick, heavy air. "I think you just revealed the true nature of your entire family." Miranda frowned. "What are you talking about?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He simply lifted a spotless white handkerchief and slowly, gently wiped the wine from his chin like a ritual. Some guests swallowed hard. Others turned to one another with wide eyes. Then Daniel raised his face, fully looking straight at the woman who had just destroyed herself with a single glass of wine and 3 minutes of arrogance. "I came here tonight," he said, "for a reason far more important than you realize." Miranda scoffed. "For attention?" No, Daniel replied, his smile deepening to observe how the Kingsley family treats someone they fail to recognize. The room exploded. Messengers buzzed. Champagne sloshed. Some people stepped back completely. Miranda froze. For the first time all evening, a flicker of doubt flashed across her eyes, a faint instinct that something was catastrophically wrong, wrong enough to chill her skin. But she still didn't know. Still couldn't guess. Still didn't understand that her thrown glass had triggered her own destruction. In just a few minutes, Daniel would speak the truth that would set the entire room ablaze and bring the Kingsley Empire crashing down like a tower built of soaked paper. The air in the ballroom thickened as if it had weight. Even the dust seemed to stop falling. Every gaze, every camera, every breath locked onto Daniel and Miranda, two opposing forces standing exactly one heartbeat away from catastrophe. Miranda Kingsley, wrapped in a glittering Chanel gown, lifted her chin with the arrogance of someone raised in a world that had never told her the word no. From the era when her father ruled the real estate scene, to the years when Edward Kingsley became a familiar name on the glossy covers of power magazines, Miranda had been taught one thing the world obeys: those who know how to command. And tonight, she was commanding, accusing, setting fire to everything her family had built over 3 generations. "Who do you think you are to speak to me like that?" Miranda hissed, her voice low and venomous like the breath of a serpent. "You are an outsider, someone who slipped in here and is trying to climb into a world that does not belong to you." Daniel didn't respond, but his eyes, deep, still cold, forced several guests to instinctively step back, sensing a storm coiling before the break. A woman whispered, "He looks familiar. I think I've seen him before." Someone beside her shook his head. "No idea. But the way he stands, he doesn't look afraid." Meanwhile, Miranda kept climbing higher on her pedestal, unaware that every word she spoke was becoming a hammer, driving nails into the coffin of her family's future. "Do you know who I am?" Miranda placed a manicured hand over her chest. "I have raised millions for helping underprivileged communities. I am someone this entire city respects. You standing here all calm won't make me hesitate." She glanced at the red wine staining Daniel's shirt and smirked. "I can do far more than that to show you that you don't belong here." A hand came forward from behind the hand of Margaret Thornfield, a well-known socialite. Her phone was still recording. "Miranda, that's enough," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "You're being filmed. Everyone is filming." "I do not care." Miranda roared, her voice cracking like thunder. "Let's see who dares do anything to me." One of the security guards coughed quietly. "Mrs. Kingsley, perhaps?" "Be quiet," Miranda snapped, spinning with fury. "I make the decisions here. I define the rules. I decide who stands in this room and who does not." Then she grabbed a glass of white wine from a passing server's tray. The soft clink of glass hitting glass echoed small but enough to jolt the entire room. Some people held their breath. Daniel remained motionless. Still. Expressionless. Like a man watching someone walk step by step toward the edge of a cliff without needing to push. Miranda raised the white wine the chandelier light, striking the clear liquid like steel. The veins in her wrist tightened, her shoulder tensed. She was in a state that no reasoning could stop. "You want a second lesson?" she snarled. "I have plenty to teach people like you." Miranda, stop. Edward Kingsley had just entered the ballroom late. Far too late. And he arrived only in time to witness a nightmare, his wife raising the second glass, ready to throw it into the face of the man he had called the savior that very morning. A wave of whispers rippled across the room, louder, now sharper. Now, "Oh my God, is that Daniel Carter, the COO of Carter Impact Group, the man behind the biggest urban development fund in the country, the one who signed the $1.5 billion deal with Kingsley this morning?" Miranda heard it. Her eyes darted panic, flashing for a split second, but too faint, too late. She let out a forced laugh. "Please, don't tell me that someone like him is—" At that exact moment, Daniel lifted his head and looked straight into her eyes. The look was calm, powerful, and cold enough to drop the temperature of the entire room. "Mrs. Kingsley," he said, his voice not loud, but carrying effortlessly each word sharp as metal. "One glass of red wine has already destroyed your dignity." He paused just long enough for the silence to tighten like a rope. "The second glass will destroy your entire life." Miranda froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had dared. "Are you threatening me?" she spat, gripping the glass so tightly the liquid trembled. "No," Daniel said. "I am describing reality." A wave of emotion surged through the room. Those who understood power, true power, realized instantly that this was no petty argument between a guest and the host of a gala. This was not a burst of rudeness. This was the unveiling of truth. A truth capable of erasing an entire corporation. Edward stepped forward, his voice cracking. "Miranda, stop, listen to me." But Miranda, drunk on her own authority, could not hear anything except herself. She lifted her chin and glared at Daniel with vicious contempt. "Reality," she laughed, breathless and mocking. "You don't even know what reality is. Reality is that you have no value here. Reality is that people like you only ever receive pity. Reality is that you should go back to wherever you belong before I call the police." Then she raised the glass, ready to fling it at Daniel's face, harder and more violently than before. But this time Daniel lifted his hand, not to block it, but to stop her from completing her own downfall. "Mrs. Kingsley, Daniel," said, lowering his voice to a deep, resonant tone that froze the entire ballroom, "you do not understand." He stepped back, wiped the wine from his cheek, folded the handkerchief. When he looked up again, his eyes sliced through Miranda's arrogance like a blade. "You are the one who does not belong here." No one breathed. No one moved. And in that silence, Daniel spoke the sentence that would become the headline of every major news outlet within hours. "Tonight I came here to see how the Kingsley family treats someone they do not recognize." Miranda frowned, ready to scoff, but the sound died in her throat. Daniel gave a faint, steady smile. "And you have given me the perfect answer." The room inhaled sharply in unison, a sound like hearing an explosion. But the real explosion had not happened yet. It would come the moment Daniel revealed who he was and what he had signed with Edward Kingsley that morning. Only a few seconds remained. Seconds before $1.5 billion and 3 generations of power turned to smoke. In the final moment, before the storm broke, the ballroom of the Aurora Grand fell into a terrifying stillness. A stillness that did not belong to an evening of luxury, but to the instant before a blade touches skin. More than 400 guests held their breath, their eyes fixed on Daniel Carter, the man who had just stood through 2 glasses of wine thrown straight into his face, yet still wore a thin, razor-sharp smile. And Miranda Kingsley, gripping her glass of white wine, stood pale, flushed, trembling between fury and dawning panic. She could sense something was wrong, something metallic and cold brushing against instinct, like the faint sound of steel touching steel. But her ego was too loud, too swollen with entitlement, too used to power to step back in time. Daniel moved forward half a step, just enough for his voice to carry, not enough to threaten. "You asked who I am," he said, his voice low yet compressed like thunder held inside stone. "Good. I'll answer you now." Every phone lifted higher. The chandelier light gleamed in everyone's eyes, sharp as lightning before the strike. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. No one knew why, but every instinct in the room screamed that they were seconds from an explosion. He swiped the screen, a simple gesture, yet whispers rippled through the ballroom like waves hitting a shore. Miranda tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. "Oh, the phone again. What now? Calling security. Calling an Uber to take you back, were you, Miranda?" Daniel cut her off. Just one word. But his tone was strong enough to force her to swallow the rest. He looked directly at her, not angry, not insulted, not shaken, just the cold certainty of someone who held the fate of the entire room in his grasp. "I am Daniel Carter." A chorus of sharp gasps swept across the ballroom. "Daniel Carter," someone whispered. "Carter." "No way," another voice murmured. "He's from Carter Impact Group, the one who signed the $1.5 billion deal this morning." But Miranda laughed, her voice trembling on the edge of arrogance and panic. "Carter what? Don't tell me you're Carter Impact Group." Daniel said each word precise and final, like nails driven into a coffin. "Chief Executive Officer, Chairman, owner of the largest urban development fund in the country." The glass in Miranda's hand slipped. It hit the marble floor and shattered, splashing across her white heels, spreading like the ashes of a collapsing empire. No one could speak. Even the ambient music from the speakers went dead, as if the sound tech had forgotten how to breathe. Daniel slowly lifted his phone, showing the open document, a JPEG of the signed contract from that morning, complete with the seal and the signature of Edward Kingsley himself. "Your husband and I signed a $1.5 billion agreement at 9:47 this morning," he said, never looking away from Miranda. "And part of that capital was designated for the inner city communities you called undeserving. The neighborhoods you labeled genetically inferior. The people you mocked." Edward Kingsley stood frozen in the center of the room, his face drained, his hands trembling so violently he couldn't even grip his phone. A small scream came from the back. "Oh my God, the cameras have been rolling all night." And then, like a domino line, igniting the room exploded with notification sounds. Beep, beep, beep. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. The hashtag Miranda Kingsley racist erupted live inside the ballroom. Miranda staggered backward each step, like the floor was being pulled out from under her feet. No, you're lying," she whispered, her voice shaking like someone freezing in the wind. Daniel stepped forward another half step, not threatening, but radiating gravity strong enough to pull every gaze toward him. "You just insulted, attacked, and humiliated the man who signed the contract that would have saved your family from collapse. Not once. Twice." Miranda's hands shook violently as she grabbed the back of a nearby chair just to stay upright. Edward, say something. Edward opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lips trembled, his eyes hollow, like a collapsing black hole. Daniel turned slightly toward him, his voice still calm. I came to this gala to determine whether the Kingsley family was fit to be a partner in rebuilding communities, carrying values of fairness and dignity. He paused. His stare cut straight through Miranda's face like a blade. Tonight you gave me the clearest answer possible. No one dared breathe. The answer is no. Miranda let out a choked, broken sound. No, you can't. You don't have the authority. I have full authority, Daniel said. And more importantly, I have responsibility. He looked down at his phone and tapped one button. A small ping echoed through the ballroom, soft, but to Miranda it struck like a death sentence. I just sent the contract termination notice to both our internal system and Kingsley Urban Development. The cancellation is effective immediately. The entire room detonated. A man shouted, "My God, the Kingsleys are finished." A woman clutched her chest. Their company, $1.5 billion gone. Margaret Thornfield exhaled sharply. Oh God, Miranda, you just ruined your entire life. Miranda stumbled backward again. Her back crashed into the buffet table, knocking an entire tray of canapes onto the floor. No, Edward, say something, help me. Her voice shrilled like wind, squeezing through an old window frame. Edward only shook his head, eyes brimming with despair. Miranda, you've destroyed us. Daniel looked at them, not angry, not triumphant. Only with the quiet sorrow of someone witnessing a collapse that could never have been avoided. You may hate me, he said, but I will not allow you to drag 50 communities down with you into the abyss. He turned to the room, to the jeweled faces, now trembling with a kind of fear they had never known in their gilded lives. This contract will not move forward. Not under the Kingsley name. Daniel stepped back, looked at Miranda one last time. You didn't destroy me with that wine, he said, his voice dropping to a depth that sent a chill up the spines of everyone nearby. You destroyed yourself. Miranda collapsed into a chair, her face drained of color, her trembling hands clawing at her dress as if trying to hold on to something vanishing beneath her. The room watched her not with scorn, not with anger, but with a silent, collective horror. Because they all realized one thing, one glass of wine, one moment of arrogance, one single night, was enough to erase a 75-year empire. The moment Daniel stepped out of the ballroom, the door closing behind him sounded like the final verdict. But the real earthquake was no longer inside the gala. It was spreading outward, sweeping across Chicago, then erupting nationwide like fire racing through dry forest. Inside the ballroom, chaos exploded. Voices rose, heels clattered across marble phones, vibrated non-stop. Many guests replayed the footage over and over, unable to believe their own eyes. The moment Miranda threw the wine, the moment Daniel revealed his identity, the moment Edward Kingsley collapsed. Some people cried. Others whispered, I've never seen anything like this in my life. But most of them they were live streaming. Within 4 minutes, the hashtags Miranda Kingsley, Racist Carter Impact, and Winegate Chicago shot straight to the top of every trending chart. In the corners of the room, people who once praised Miranda now trembled and covered their faces, afraid of appearing in someone's video. Those who used to flatter her turned their backs and hurried out, terrified of being associated with her collapse. The two security guards stood frozen, unable to look at each other, as if they had just witnessed a public execution in the modern age. And Miranda didn't move. She slumped in a chair, hands gripping her head, mascara, dripping in long black streaks. Sob after sob choked out of her trembling lips. But no one approached her. No one dared. Edward stepped toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Miranda jerked away and screamed. Why was everyone filming? Why? Her voice cracked with desperation. Too late, too hollow, too pitiful to change anything. Meanwhile, outside the Aurora Grand, a wall of lights had risen. News vans, camera flashes, microphones. Reporters crowded the entrance, as if a century-defining trial had just ended inside the hotel. They had caught fragments from early leaving guests, and that was enough for the news to spread faster than fire meeting wind. Confirmed the victim was Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter Impact Group. Sources say the $1.5 billion contract was cancelled on the spot. Wife of Kingsley Urban Development chairman, caught on camera physically and verbally attacking him with explicit racist remarks. News outlets raced to publish. TMZ breaking billionaire heir embroiled in racist scandal at Chicago gala. CNN black CEO attacked with wine at charity event Carter Impact confirms $1.5 billion contract cancelled. BBC fall of an empire, arrogance at Chicago gala, triggers economic disaster. Within 1 hour, the video reached 20 million views. Meanwhile, Daniel had returned to his office. His shirt was still stained with wine, the smell of Bordeaux soaked deep into the fabric, but he didn't bother changing. He sat down heavily like a soldier after a battle he never wanted, but had been forced to fight. Olivia Park, his communications director, burst through the door with her laptop glowing. "Sir, it's exploding. The audience engagement, we've never seen anything like it." Daniel nodded. "I figured." Olivia swallowed hard. Civil rights organizations are reaching out. Several corporations have issued internal statements demanding immediate culture audits. The press wants an interview within the next 30 minutes. Daniel looked at his hands, sticky with dried wine. And the Kingsleys. Olivia opened the market dashboard. Their stock is in freefall, down 42% in the last hour of trading. It will be worse tomorrow morning. Daniel didn't respond. His words from the ballroom, "This contract is over," had triggered hundreds of automated trading algorithms to initiate mass liquidation. The Kingsley three-generation empire had already begun its countdown. At the Kingsley mansion in the northern suburbs of Chicago, phones rang non-stop. Edward stumbled through the living room, past family portraits that now seemed to mock him. He turned on the TV. Immediately slow-motion footage of Miranda throwing the wine appeared. No, he whispered, feeling his chest tighten. In the corner of the screen was the stock chart for Kingsley Urban Development, a red line plummeting like an arrow stabbing into the earth. 20 minutes later, the company's banking consortium called with icy voices. "We want an emergency meeting." Immediately. Outside the gate, reporters shouted, "Mr. Kingsley, any comment on your wife calling a black CEO genetically inferior? Is it true your company is heading toward bankruptcy?" "Did you know what happened at the gala tonight?" Edward sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He knew everything was over, and the one who ended it wasn't Daniel. It was his wife. Back at the Aurora Grand, the scene looked like the aftermath of a social bomb. Guests fled, faces tight, terrified of being questioned. Margaret Thornfield wiped sweat from her brow while live streaming, whispering, "I can't believe I just witnessed that." Miranda had been fully abandoned by her wealthy circle. She curled into the chair, a distorted shadow of the woman she had been. Mascara streamed down her neck in 2 dark lines. Her voice trembled in broken whispers. I didn't mean I didn't. But those excuses meant nothing now. Footage from 16 different angles was spreading across the world, unedited, unfiltered, unavoidable. Across the city, Daniel stepped onto his office balcony and looked over the glowing Chicago skyline. The cold night wind bit into his skin, but his mind burned with conviction. He tapped his internal line. "Olivia, yes, sir. I don't want this to end with the contract cancellation. I want this to become a lesson for the entire industry. Prepare a statement. Keep it professional. No personal attack. Focus on community values and corporate ethics." Olivia paused, then said softly, "This is why people respect you, sir." Daniel leaned against the railing, eyes drifting over the streets below. Tonight wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who has ever been treated like they don't belong in this world. His breath floated out as white mist. Now he whispered, "The change begins." As for the Kingsleys, the nightmare was only beginning. 1 hour later, CNBC updated Kingsley Urban Development stock falls 63%, and after-hours trading chief financial officer and several board investors reported fleeing. Financial analysts predicted bankruptcy within 48 hours. Hashtags like "Cancel Kingsley" and "Dignity over Hate" thundered across social media. The entire country was watching. The entire country was judging. And at the center of the storm stood Daniel Carter, calm as a midnight lake, with the steady, quiet light of someone who had reclaimed dignity, not just for himself, but for millions of others who had ever been told they did not belong. The next morning, Chicago did not wake to the usual sound of traffic, but to television switching on at the same moment inside thousands of apartments. Anyone who turned on the news saw the stunned face of Miranda Kingsley, wine splashing through the air, Daniel Carter standing calm as stone, and the headline scrolling across the screen, "Racist Assault Pushes Kingsley Corporation to the Brink of Bankruptcy." By 9 in the morning, Kingsley Urban Development had officially been dragged into the biggest corporate disaster in its history. On the 42nd floor of the West Loop Tower, the atmosphere inside Kingsley headquarters felt like a courtroom awaiting sentencing. Some employees quietly packed their belongings, while others huddled together, watching the financial markets live. A barrage of message alerts, emails, and notifications hammered the office windows like hail. Meridian Bank just pulled their credit line. The Shoreline project is suspended. Stock has dropped to $11. We're going bankrupt. In the main boardroom, the directors sat pale and silent, as if they'd witnessed a catastrophic accident. The dim light filtering through the blinds made the room feel like the morgue of a company not yet pronounced dead. The door opened. Daniel Carter walked in, standing tall, his white shirt still stained with the Bordeaux wine from the night before, a living reminder of the cruelty he endured. No one dared look him in the eye. They sat frozen, waiting for the verdict. Edward Kingsley jumped to his feet, desperation twisting his face. "Daniel, please." "Miranda. She didn't. She was drunk, that's all. She lost control. You must believe me." "Leave. This is not the company's values. It was just—" "No," Daniel said sharply, his voice heavy and cold like stone striking water. "That wasn't drunkenness. That was her nature." The room fell completely silent, as if encased in ice. Edward trembled. "Daniel, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." Daniel spoke slowly. "What happened last night was not the behavior of one individual. It was the result of a culture you allowed to exist for years." He opened his leather case, pulled out the contract that had already been officially cancelled, and placed it on the table. The thud echoed like a death sentence. Elizabeth Morrison, a board member, swallowed hard. "Daniel, please, if the contract is terminated, tens of thousands of people will lose their jobs. Entire neighborhoods waiting for redevelopment will be abandoned. You hold the livelihoods of many people in your hands. Daniel lifted his gaze. That is exactly why I attended the gala, to see if the Kingsley family deserved that responsibility. He paused, then said, "The answer is no." Several board members gripped their chairs to stay steady. Edward nearly collapsed. "Daniel, I beg you. I will divorce Miranda. I will resign. I will hand everything to you. Whatever you want, it's yours. Please save the company." But Daniel simply looked at him, his eyes deep, carrying not anger, but sorrow, because he knew the suffering would fall, not only on the guilty, but also on the innocent, caught in the system. "I cannot take community money built on trust and hand it to an organization that allowed supremacy to exist inside both its management and its founding family," Daniel said. "This is not personal. This is responsibility." He drew his Mont Blanc pen. The board members lurched forward instinctively, as if wanting to stop him, but too afraid to touch him. The room held its breath as the pen touched the paper. 30 seconds. 30 seconds that would rewrite history. When he finished the final stroke, Daniel set the pen down, as gently as placing flowers on a grave. The contract between Carter Impact Group and Kingsley Urban Development is officially terminated. Edward broke down in tears, a raw, bone-deep cry of a man whose entire world had shattered. 2 hours later, the shockwave hit the market. CNN went live. Kingsley stock falls to $8 in 9 minutes. Trading halted after a 75% crash. Foreign partners withdraw. Meridian Bank begins asset recovery. Outside Kingsley headquarters, reporters crowded the sidewalk, shoving microphones forward, like spears aimed at a dying animal. "Mr. Kingsley, the company is collapsing. Do you have a statement? Did Miranda really say, 'genetically inferior,' as the video shows? Can your family keep the Northbrook estate? Did you know Daniel Carter was the one who signed the deal to save your company?" Edward stood there, with disheveled hair, red eyes, unable to speak a single word. Employees streamed out, one by one, carrying cardboard boxes. A young woman sobbed, "I just finished paying off my car, and now I'm unemployed." A man muttered angrily, "We're losing everything," because she couldn't keep her mouth shut. Inside the boardroom, the monitors flashed red like emergency sirens. The numbers plunged like a waterfall. Daniel watched from afar, silent. Not pleased, not triumphant, not vengeful. Only the heavy calm of a man who knew the truth always comes with a price. That afternoon, 4 black FBI SUVs pulled up to Kingsley headquarters with a federal search warrant for internal discrimination allegations. Staff rushed to the windows, stunned. At the same time, Daniel's legal team filed charges against Miranda for assault with hate bias, along with a request for a full federal investigation into Kingsley's internal policies. Within an hour, a federal judge issued a summons. Miranda was arrested at the entrance of her mansion in front of dozens of cameras. The click of the handcuffs echoed like a final sentence. She sobbed as officers guided her into the police car mascara, leaking like ink washed away by tears. "Please turn off the cameras, please," she cried. But no one did. That evening at the Carter Impact offices, Daniel sat by the window overlooking the illuminated city. Olivia placed a report in front of him. "So the public support for you is beyond anything we imagined. Civil rights groups, activists, even international media want you to speak." Daniel closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "Then we will speak. But not about revenge. This will be about the system, about dignity, about change." He opened his eyes and looked out at the city where millions of people were living, struggling, hoping. Last night wasn't just a thrown glass of wine. It was a mirror showing this society's truth. Olivia nodded. "So what do we do now?" Daniel stood. His voice was deep, steady, carrying the weight of something larger. "We begin the work of repair." And across the city, the Kingsley Empire collapsed brick by brick. No one could stop it. No one could save it. No one could deny the truth. It all began with a single glass of wine, a moment of arrogance, and a man who stood drenched in it, yet never let go of his dignity. The morning after the arrest, the federal courtroom was packed so tightly there wasn't a single space left to stand. Flashing cameras sliced through the hallway like blades of white light. Miranda Kingsley was escorted inside her hands, in cuffs. Her face drained of color, her eyes swollen from crying. She lifted her head, searching for some form of salvation, but all she found were cold, unforgiving stares. The gaze of a public witnessing her destroy her family's future, with only a few minutes of arrogance. Judge Naomi Carter, the first black woman to hold a federal seat in the district, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose in respect. When they sat, the judge leaned slightly forward, her eyes sharp enough to cut through the remnants of makeup still clinging to Miranda's face. Mrs. Kingsley, the judge, said, her voice calm but powerful, "The court acknowledges that your actions were not only assault, but carried a clearly identifiable element of bias." The video shows sustained verbal abuse rooted in racial prejudice. This was not a momentary lapse. This was a choice. Each word fell like a hammer strike. Miranda trembled, bowing her head. "I'm sorry," she choked out, but crying could no longer save anything. The judge continued. "The court orders remand no bail. Your formal trial will begin in 30 days. You will be held accountable for the consequences of your actions." The gavel came down. A lifetime of privilege closed. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, reporters crowded every inch of space calling Daniel's name. But Daniel was nowhere near the scene. He was at Carter Impact Group headquarters, meeting with his legal and communications teams, preparing redevelopment plans for the communities whose contracts were now being transferred to a new partner. He did not look back at the Kingsley family's downfall. He did not linger on victory. He did not feel regret. He simply said one sentence, quiet but razor sharp. "We have too much work ahead, and we cannot let one moment of hatred slow down the progress of an entire community." Beyond the office windows, Chicago glowed as if the city itself had chosen the side of dignity. 1 year after the storm known as the Kingsley Scandal, the building that once housed their empire now bore a new name: the Carter Center for Dignity and Justice. The cracks in the walls had been repaired, the lobby transformed into an open space where the laughter of students and the echo of presentations pulsed like the heartbeat of a city in recovery. Daniel Carter walked down the hallway, passing rows of paintings created by inner-city students. Bold, fierce colors, the very colors Miranda Kingsley once claimed did not belong in high society, had now become the soul of the new center. Aisha Nguyen, the 17-year-old who had earned a scholarship from Daniel's post-scandal community fund, ran up to him holding a design draft for a new community hub. "Mr. Daniel, I want this area to have a big playground for the kids. They told me they've never had a real one." Daniel smiled, pride softening his eyes. "That's an excellent idea, and we'll build it. For them and for everyone who's ever been overlooked." Across the city, Miranda Kingsley stepped out of the rehabilitation center after 10 months behind bars. She wore a grey coat, clutching a simple cloth bag. No diamonds, no bodyguards, no proud stare. Only the empty eyes of someone who had finally seen the real cost of the prejudice she once wielded. She looked up at Chicago, the city she once believed lay beneath her heel. Now it stood before her, larger, stronger, with no place left for the hatred she once embodied. Meanwhile, Daniel, in his final meeting of the day, stood before a group of students and young entrepreneurs and spoke the sentence that would later be engraved onto a large plaque in the center's grand hall. Justice is not about destroying someone. Justice is turning hatred into a lesson that transforms an entire system. If a single glass of wine can topple an empire, then a single act of dignity can rebuild a generation. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. And so, from the ashes of arrogance, a new future was born, brighter, fairer, and stronger than ever before. From the perspective of an expert in ethics and leadership, this story does more than expose the consequences of prejudice. It proves that dignity is the most enduring form of strength. A single act of hatred can destroy an empire, but a single right choice can open the path for an entire generation to rise. If you believe that respect and justice must be practiced every single day, then like and subscribe to help spread stories that carry real value. And before you go, leave a short comment, just one simple phrase: Due femme dignity.